there ain't really much to know. I was born and brought up around London, but have now lived in Cornwall for about 10 years. I've always been into cars, even from a young lad, playing with Need for Speed Underground and Colin McRae rally games. As soon as I could get my hand on a licence, I did.
Hi, my name's Ty, and this is my barn find.
3, 2, 1, fire!
One of my first cars I ever owned was a Vauxhall Corsa B. It was just a great, first time driver car. My mum bought me the car, bless her. And really appreciated doing that, as it was the first car that I got on the road. But sadly I had an accident in it, as all young drivers do. And then went on from there. Purchased myself, my first real car I purchased myself was my Ford Fiesta, the 1600 limited edition. Loved it, bought it as it was, and then really started modifying it with, as you can imagine, the neons and things. I remember having an LED light up bar in the back of the car, and it used to go in time with the music, and that was really what started me running car clubs, going to different car meets, and then starting to run my own car club. I run a modified car club in Cornwall for around 5 to 6 years, organising different events, being the general pain in but then taking it a little bit further and then starting raising money for charities and things and taking it further afield. Over the time running the modified car club, I also owned a Mark 1 MX-5, and then one of the fastest cars I ever owned, which was the BMW E39 530i. Not one of these cars were ever standard by the time I'd finished with them. And every single one of them I entered into different events, from show and shines, auto solos, drag and drift events. One of the best experiences I ever had was competing in the Devon Cannonball Run. I took the BMW and a handful of my closest friends, and we went to compete in obviously a completely illegal race. And we only really went for a bit of a laugh, but we ended up winning it by 8 minutes, and there hasn't been another one since, so we're still the current record holders of the race. Okay, so she is a 1979 MGB GT. I purchased her off of a young lad who actually purchased her on a bulk deal. It turns out the gent he bought it off had a Defender that he wanted, but because the gent was terminally ill, he took the bulk deal to save the man's widow having to try to sell them all after he was gone. The car came off the road back in 1993 and was tucked in a garage for a refurb that sadly obviously never happened. I was told that he plans to take it off the road, restore it and build it into like a track or a sprint style car, which is exactly what I had planned. Don't get me wrong, I've loved the cars I've owned, but I always wanted to do a complete rebuild from ground up, and this was my opportunity to do it. I mean, you'll see from this video, to be honest with you, and possibly others, that I am nowhere near trained as a mechanic, and there'll probably be loads of easier ways to do it, and you'll probably be screaming at me while I'm doing it, but if you don't do it, you'll always regret not doing it, so we're going to give it a go. After deciding to go down the British Leyland route, I convinced my wife that it was a great idea to do this, and convinced my best mate Tank, who will appear in the video a couple of times, convinced him that it would be a great idea to help me build this. This is where we're at the minute. After me and Tank got it back, the main game plan was to completely strip it down, because there was still some bits left in. The gearbox was in, all the windows were still in, and so on and so forth. So we had to strip it down completely. Even start tearing down some of the engine. You know, we had a look in there, noticed that the bearings are completely gone. It was going to need new seals, new piston rings and things like that. But yeah, it was predominantly just strip down, work out what parts we've got, what parts we haven't, put the parts away in a store, what's reusable, what's not reusable, and then just general clean down, you know, get jet wash out, hot soapy, get the gearbox cleaned up as much as possible, and then of course the underneath. Tanky had a little trick with being able to clean underneath. It was always quite handy. Tanky is definitely a handyman to know, and we wouldn't have him any other way. Tank himself is actually currently trying to restore an old tractor of his that he's had for about 10 years now. I've probably got this wrong, but I think it's a Fortin Harrison. Again, probably got that wrong. But yeah, we had to move it so I could get the MG into its corner, and I'd finished around with the camera. I knew the first move was to start stripping the axle down. So it was pretty much a case of first getting hold of the steering column and sorting out the rack and pinion and things, taking that apart, and then obviously jacking it up in its place, getting it all set ready to go, and just completely strip out the front axle, rebuild the whole front axle. I noticed a few things that concerned me a little bit while taking it apart, one of which being that the calipers aren't on it, which is obviously a big issue if you're planning to stop at any point. But nothing too horrendous. It was more just a case of let's get it out, let's strip it down and refurb it, change the bushes obviously because the bushes were knackered, and go from there.
Great success.
You can see from the clips that there's nothing absolutely horrendous. It just literally needs sandblasting, flattening back, refurbing and putting back on together. The car came with a set of 14-inch road style alloys, and I was planning to go over to the typical race wheels that are available. I think it's like 6-spoke ones. But then actually Tank come up with an idea of going a little bit different, and because we're looking at adding a Sebring kit to the car, we're actually going to band the wheels. We're going to take them out about 3 inches, I think. But before I send them off, what I want to do is get the bodywork all sorted, get the Sebring kit attached to the car, and then I'll be able to sell just how much we want to band the wheels, just to get the line tucked in nicely, especially with that added camber at the bottom with the extended arms. Once the wheels are off, we put the front axle on the bench, and it was just time to strip it down completely. I started off with obviously the rack and pinion steering, and then worked my way through with the hubs, took the brake discs off. Didn't need to do the calipers because obviously they weren't there. And then obviously checking the front upper arms and the lower arms and things. Again, most of those are sandblasted. It looked like that the top arm suspension had recently been refurbed, or had been refurbed and then left. So actually we were pretty happy that actually we could put them back on no problem, just with a quick tidy up. But then we noticed, or Tank noticed, an issue with the lowering arms.
Really good job of it. Looks really smart. But yeah, posted in about 6 months.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's good. I don't know what that's all about. And then 2 days ago, he posted. He's quitting.
They've had issue here.
Sorry.
They've had issue here.
Yeah, it looks like it's been welded and
They've had wells of motion.
Okay guys, I'm not sure if you can see how well the camera's going to show it, but we think they've had a bit of an issue in the past with the lower arms. I don't know if you can see, but it looks like there's a washer that's been welded on the inside. Now if I turn it over the other side, you can see how out of shape that is there. We think what's happened is that basically a bolt has gone through and the bolt was worn with the speed and then extended out, giving it issues. But not to worry. What we're going to do, we're actually going to replace these completely with some brand new extended arms, just to give us that little bit of camber, which will help us towards racing events and things, just to kick the bottom of the tyres out a little bit. So yeah, we'll need to get those replaced ASAP. after that, we just continued the strip down, got everything apart and separated. And then it was more a case of sandblasting, priming and painting. Feel free to subscribe and watch our next video, where you'll see us rebuild the whole of the front axle with brand new Super Pro poly bushes and a bit of sandblasting and painting.